Hey, how's it going, future you? I've been trying to concentrate on simplicity, and even doing that, it's becoming largely complicated. I started realizing why others in indies start off with something much smaller and horror games or like pixel games or some kind of platformer to begin with. And having done some indie research while I'm working on this every day, usually I'm listening to both brain rot and brain thought content. I've noticed like a lot of indies usually tend to avoid Unreal Engine because it is quite insane, where even AAA studios and AA studios run across common issues, which sort of gives me a lot of anxiety for what I'm doing, and it's understandable. But I'm delusional, so yeah. So, anyway, something I'm always careful of is just trying to maintain stable performance. But there's only so much I can do because I don't really know that much about it, other than to try to keep the reins in. Other than obviously don't crank everything up to max just because I can. An example like this could be the smoke cloud explosion I did before, and water stuff I did that filled up a hole could tank FPS down to 2 to 5 easily and make the workspace kind of impossible. It was great for a cinematic and clip, but when I was testing real time, it had to be tuned down a lot and just to get it functional. But getting like a new cloud that was seemingly full resolution was just magic tricks, and it turned out it works. I don't know. It looked great to me, and the performance was stable without sudden tank or giant stutter and etc. and those things. This can also get worse as more things reach into the scene later on, but this is more like working on a core area of my game where I wanted to be able to see it thousands of times throughout my development and still be satisfied about it later on. Because I'm making forward assumptions that maybe my player will see this a couple times or less than 50 times or something, or throughout, or not that often essentially. But me, on the other hand, I need to be able to see it like a couple thousand times and still be okay with it even later on, and make adjustments along the way. I was probably spent about half a week just fine tuning settings and timing alone, or maybe even a whole week. I really have lost track of time just to really get an idea of where I'm going with my own project. Stuff like camera and just not even transitioning properly with a weird jitter sometimes, or nitpicking small frames of less than 3 to 5 frames. That's less than a tenth of a second in the sequence to make sure it's right. It's like stuff that like I pass it to a few friends and family, and they're just like, yeah, this looks fine. And then I still notice it, which is, it's hell annoying to adjust. And I'm perfectly happy like adjusting it too. Like it's just annoying to do, but I'm happy doing it for like 12 to 16 hours a day. It's strictly like polish, but it's important to me. It's purely just constant attention, as well as like to optimizations throughout. There's some things I don't care about optimizing simply because I know I'm designing things a certain way to not have to worry about it, which allows for a less stringent check on it. So basically, the concept would be like, oh, if I'm gonna like chop this out of what I need to make, then I get more room to crank this up and make it look crazier, which is kind of what I want. But then I still obviously have to keep in mind that it's not just like, oh, let's just make this like 8K resolution textures when 512 does the job, essentially. Player-wise, I'm going to assume it's going to be important more than graphics, obviously, but, you know, I still want my game to look kind of nice, is why I went this route with Unreal rather than pixel games or something like that. And it's also more of a familiar medium I've always played in. One of the confusing things I've gone through lately is just user interface, and then into boss and monster behavior. That's like a completely like whole new like 4 different departments in my head, and I don't even know what's happening. It just sort of works, and it's kind of clunky, and like I'm like, oh, okay, I've got AoE indicators, and he's got like 2 different phases or whatever, and then like the monsters are like working an entirely different way, and then the user interface was like a whole labyrinth nightmare too. And I really need to like go back and just like double check everything and then make sure I write down even further like how to reuse it, because now there's so much happening that it's hard to actually keep track of like what's everything. And you know, this goes back to the point of me talking about the pixelated games and whatever, you know, they have a whole less dimension to worry about. Like pixel games is 2 dimensions, right? 3D, there's a 3rd dimension you have to worry about, and it just makes complexity go n to the x power or whatever, and you just lose track of everything and how stuff is like rendered onto a 3D versus like a 2D, a camera angle. Most 2D games, you're on a fixed camera. Here, it's like the camera is rotating and can do other things. It's literally another character of its own. So, and then now I have like different environments and stuff and problems. Like pixels is like, think about it like this. If you're doing a pixel character, you draw the pixels and the character is already rendered. It's all done for you. 3D is like, all right, you got to model it out or whatever, generated these days and whatnot. Then you got to like color it. Then you make sure it like deforms properly or whatever. Pixels is like, you just block out the next few frames of what the character is supposed to look like, and then you start coloring it in, and it's like rendered, done. And then how many frames in between or whatever. But then like 3D is like, hello. It was like, so, but basically, you know, rewinding back to just like development wise, I still have to go through like the behavior, user interface and stuff that I was talking about. I took a bit rewinding back, adding a better dodge in after I got the boss in, just for like just testing. Like these monsters and whatever are just like placeholder assets. I haven't really come up with designs for any of those quite yet. It was just more so getting the functionality of these things working so that I can actually just replicate my process over and over. One of the things was like the second character that I brought in is exactly that. I'll talk about that in a moment. But I just wanted to make sure like functionality wise, like the dodge felt kind of smooth. Just the timing and reaction of utilizing dodges properly, making sure it feels good and controls was important to me. And that took another week just to make sure it felt kind of smooth. It's still a bit clunky here and there, and maybe I'll adjust that later. Then it feature creeped into changing attack steps forward after dodge, or allowing ability use linking in like combo windows, or like opening up. Otherwise, it was like, if you do like a double dodge, your character kind of gets sort of stunned at the end of the animation because the animation plays all the way there, and there was no way to get out of it. And then just getting out of it was like a whole stream of different logic, because otherwise it allowed other things to be spammable. So the end part was different than the in-between parts, without getting too technically jargon about it. It's still a bit clunky here and there. So, you know, and then, you know, just from linking into combos or like just breaking out of like motions or whatever and having forward momentum in a swing that I was messing around with, it got way too complicated. I just started feature creeping like everything in that department alone. And then I started forgetting that, you know, I have to put time into environment, user interface, enemies, story, NPC, characters that I need in the game, or like how I'm gonna start designing it. You know, who's gonna voice this? Who's gonna do music or whatever. I had combos and dodge windows also like breaking and locking up attacks that were being able to be spammed in weird circumstances, and then like weird mini cutscenes that kept firing off because the thing didn't clear itself or whatever. So then I was like, damn, I gotta QA my own game now too because my logic sucks ass. And then I rewinded further back from that functionality into environment. Not entirely my favorite area of development, but something I want to get better, because I know it's the playground for the characters and the story. I had to try and make some kind of fake subsurface scattering on the land because it can't actually take on that shading technique because the engine hates it and will crash. And I was like really scared to lock up my project over it. I should probably make a backup, honestly. I've actually been developing this like kind of stupidly. There is a backup, but then it's just, I just don't do it that often. And then I was doing something really experimental that could have just killed like the level or whatever to make it crash on load. And then I split it off into a separate level, obviously, once I started being a little bit more professional about it, I guess. And that was just like a learning pain. And it was just usually how that happens is because I'm getting carried away with an idea. And then I just started doing it on the main area. And I was like, wait, no, this is dumb. I should be doing this on a separate, like, you know, area or a separate project entirely. And then I was just lazy and I was like locked in on the idea of the solution. And then I just started exercising it on the main stage. And I was like, wait, this is dumb. This is dumb. I need to stop. But, you know, it's fine. I wasn't expecting it to work, was why I sort of like paused on it. It was more of an experiment and seeing if more crazy stuff could be pulled or not. And obviously didn't. I had to end up doing some kind of fake way of like doing subsurface on the land because the land really does not accept that. And also because there's also like 9 other layers of different surfaces and materials and like grass and whatever that operate on it too, right? So it's already really complicated. So it's probably better this way that it didn't work. One of the other things I did was color the sword for what I could thought it was all right. Mapping the lightning effect was pretty fun to do and seeing the results of it because, but mapping it was about 90% super boring, but then the last 10% of testing and seeing the timing of it going off was super cool. Because before, when I worked on this effect in like the VFX trailer or whatever, I only saw it in like fixed scenes or like fixed motions and whatnot that I keyframed and whatever. But now I see it in actual action is insane to me. It's like seeing pure magic. It's great. I studied a bit of anime and wipeout effects and manga stuff too. I always noticed they had this tiny flip of loss of colors and everything else to showcase a bit of a feel when something really extreme was happening. An example would be a villain dying or a character getting wiped out. And I tried to build an effect around that. I tried getting it into a bit of an effect that I did a lot recently in drawings of cross-hatching I did. So I wanted a similar effect and to that feel. So I wanted sort of like the whole screen and the whole like scene and everything to just feel like a drawing for like a split second. And I saw this in also effects of games that I played like Wuthering Waves, and they utilized similar methods. Obviously, I just wanted something more raw and like artistic and wasn't really like I wanted it to feel rough. I wanted it to feel rough, sort of like unrefined and just really violent feeling. And I feel like I kind of got there. Obviously, there's more adjustments I need to make about it. But I spent probably like a week and a half just trying to get that effect working and also timing and everything. Making use of the effect too was also a lot because when I'm setting it up and just like seeing it on the scene, it's really jarring and like sort of like head spinning, but when used in about a fraction of a second or just in a lead up moment into it, it looks crazy. And to me, when it worked with everything set up after, just all this just for a single effect for one attack and for just like a split second. And when I saw it in action, I was like, yeah, this was totally worth it. This was totally worth the 1.5 to 2 weeks of me just working on this stupid ass effect. And it turned out fucking great in my opinion. And really, I just knowing the fact that it worked, it pretty much solidified like a lot of excitement and motivation for other attacks I was going to do later to see how it turns out. And that's really exciting to look forward to, but I have to get through other stuff before I can even work on that. Otherwise, my character is just going to be hitting the air, which isn't all that exciting. So that's another problem. I have to like get through all this stuff before I get to like add the finishing touch of the recipe that I want to cook and like put it through onto the screen. I'll be like, oh yeah, there it is, everything put together. That's like the climax like of joy in development for me here. Same with the objects. I gave it a bit of variance because hitting objects with a metal blade and thinking about like the detail, it's like, okay, well, the character's swinging the blade pretty like viciously and connecting with stone, and it's making like a weird, strange noise, right? And that's really disconnecting. Like, I also don't want it to hear like nothing. If I hear nothing, it feels like the sword's just phasing through the thing, obviously. So, and then same with the arrow. It's like, the sword is launching into wood. So it's like, what does sword sound like hitting wood? And obviously another whole research tunnel just to like make sure it sounds kind of correct. And then, from the correct sound, it's also amplifying and exaggerating the noise to be believable to still be wood or whatever, for whatever reason, right? So for the stone, as an instance, the sword hitting a stone sounds actually pretty lame. But then, like, it's still pretty sharp right now. It needs more adjustments, but like the sword against the wood sounds really good to me for now, because I actually, what was it? I think I put like some kind of like hit noise with like flesh or something in there, and then I tweaked like the pitch settings on it really, really high or something, and dropped another one really, really low. And then when I combined the two, it actually sounded perfect. But the stone was like, there's a random variants in there where when you hit it, it sounds really, really like fleshy or chunky. That was actually like a pickaxe or like a hammer glancing off of like some kind of metal. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds like stone to me. So, you know, I have to do like weird exaggerations because if it sounds too real, it's just like, I'm not trying to make a simulation of life here. I'm trying to make a weird fantasy world where players are not thinking about real life. It just looks cool. That's kind of the idea. So I created a modular component about this as well to deal with like that. So then if I have different objects, I can just assign that to. That spent about like maybe a couple days just building that component out. And it works just fine. Then I was testing white noise tolerance so that when stuff breaks, it's not just an overwhelming like static playthrough of noises. So it was figuring out a random range of delays between like 0.05 of a second up to like 0.12 of a second is sort of like your ear tolerance. So that was like actual real biology. I had to learn about noise sibilance. On a semi-related tangent though, while I was working on this, there was a huge wave of noise about a streamer that pretty much stands for start killing games, I guess, and ousted as an imposter. That also gave me kind of a confidence boost since I have severe imposter syndrome and a bit of frustration at how the world works, I guess. So Pirate Software, as everybody knows by now, at this point anyways, worked on his game supposedly for 8 years on a Pixel game maker studio, and a whole slew of other stuff just coming out after that. And I watched a streamer, Quinn69, play it objectively and not hate play it. And yeah, it seems all right for what it was. But after seeing that, I was pretty much took away going, holy hell, I do not want to be working on this game that I'm working on for 8 years that long with that little amount of content to go through. And considering the resources Pirate Software has had available to him, it's just crazy to me how he hasn't been completed when here I am struggling about breadcrumbs and still moving on. So it's been about 5 or 6 months since I began with a character I drew on a piece of paper. In the last devlog, I wanted it done in a year, which is psychotic. I don't even believe it myself because it's not even realistic, I think. But there's an irrational side of me that's the majority of the thought process that wants it like an addiction. Unfortunately, this want causes a lot of development hurdles, considering I'm also only doing this with, beginner knowledge in the area, just trying to get things to work without creating a long-term mess that'll take forever to do to debug or fix anything, which leads me to spending another week or so just cleaning up logic, weird code, experimental craps, and thinking about decoupling areas of operations the character has. So from here, I rewinded even further back to character creation and getting the second character in, which wasn't too bad. I was afraid it was going to take long, but I revisited our process I wrote down and actually fixed her eyes and everything and stuff within a day. It's not noticeable if somebody actually really dissected like the lightning arrow shot. You can tell her eyes are actually a little bit messed up. It's just that I think I sort of faked it with like the camera and whatever, so it's not even really noticeable. But her eyes are actually messed up in that scene. It just looked okay enough for me where I was like, okay, I'll publish this, and moved her into this project without much of a hiccup after I fixed it. So one of the landmines that's basically waiting to blow up in my face is the separate structures the main character and the second one is using when they spawn from the same structure. I only separated out the main character structure because I was doing something really experimental and breaking things to see if it worked back then. And then I figured out how to add or remove and customize stuff without breaking an entire system. Because at the current engine's version 5.6, they unleashed new tools and things within that same framework for this character that can make use of it. And I really want to make use of those because that basically helps speed up development a lot, as well as like cover areas that would be really difficult to learn the old traditional way and taking much longer to do than utilizing the new tools they've released that allow it to speed up those processes because they've just streamlined it for that framework of the character. And then one of the bigger things is just remerging the two character structures back together and align it to the base one so that, and make sure I didn't break anything else. Otherwise, it'll and And yeah, so that I didn't break anything else. That way it'll conform straight into those updates when I move the engine into the new version and the new features if I upgrade the engine there, which I do want to do because I'm working on 5.4 right now. And when I built the game into a playable file, there was a serious rendering issue with one of the effects I made that doesn't show up in the editor. It only shows up on a playable build. And when I check the Unreal Engine like issues, like bugs list or whatever for that version, it says there was a fix for it, and it was like a noted, like, you know, it was a critical issue or whatever with that asset type or whatever, right? And it said the target fix was an engine version 5.5 and onwards. So in 5.4, it's actually full on bugged, and there's nothing I can do about it because I'm not going to be an engine architect, obviously. And so I have to update it into 5.5, 5.6, which will, you know, hopefully everything just lines up together and there won't be some kind of like game breaking issue. Otherwise, that'll be a big sad. So there's a big forward movement step there. There's two huge critical steps essentially right there in front of me. But I have to also do that at some point. But I need to get past a number of things before heading there. So sort of like solidifying my UI development a bit better, the boss behavior a little bit better, and then setting up the environment work to be a bit less rigid so it's a bit more loose. And hopefully things will turn out okay. Anyways, good luck to you, future self, and everyone else who was here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Consider liking and subscribing. It really helps me, and peace.